picking up this big block of cheese, right? And everybody would be sitting there watching you and be like, oh my gosh, they're poor. And you walk in school, you're like,
Football is a game of passion, power, and toughness, and no one showed that more than Ray Lewis. He wasn't just a linebacker, he was the heartbeat of the Baltimore Ravens and one of the fiercest leaders the NFL has ever seen. Known for his intensity and his fire, Ray demanded respect every single time he stepped on the field. But here's the thing, while he admired greatness, there were some players he simply couldn't stand. Rivalries that went beyond the whistle, battles that felt personal. Today, we're looking at the 6 players Ray Lewis hated the most and the stories that made these grudges unforgettable. These clashes were more than football. They were battles for respect and pride. Every rivalry pushed Ray harder and gave fans some of the fiercest moments in NFL history. When it comes to Ray Lewis's fiercest rival, no one fits the role better than Hines Ward. Ward wasn't your typical wide receiver. Wideouts are usually known for speed and flashy catches, but Ward, he was built different. He played with the toughness of a linebacker, and that attitude made him one of the most hated and respected players in the league at the same time. What made Ward special was his love for blocking. Most receivers avoid contact. Ward looked for it. He had no problem cracking a linebacker, and that style rubbed defenders the wrong way. For Ray Lewis, the heart of Baltimore's defense, Ward's approach felt like a direct challenge. And Ray never let a challenge slide. The Ravens and Steelers rivalry was already the NFL's most brutal war. Fights. Ward added gasoline to that fire. He was known for his blindside hits that left defenders dazed. In 2008, he broke Bengals linebacker Keith Rivers' jaw with one of those blocks, which later pushed the NFL to change the rules. That reputation followed him into every game against Baltimore. Ray Lewis and the Ravens saw Ward as dirty. Ward, on the other hand, wore it like a badge of honor. He said defenders hated him because he exposed them. Every matchup with Ray became a personal battle, not just for yards or catches, but for respect. What made their clashes unforgettable is that both were leaders. Ray was the face of Baltimore's defense. Ward was the emotional spark of Pittsburgh's offense. When they met in the middle of the field, it wasn't just 2 players colliding, it was 2 entire teams, 2 entire cities, crashing into each other. For Ray Lewis, Hines Ward was the kind of rival that never went away. Every hit, every tackle, every stare-down carried years of history. It wasn't just competition, it was war dressed up as football. Put it out. Ray Lewis led Baltimore, with proving they were the toughest man on the field. Harrison didn't even come into the league as a star and had to claw his way into a roster spot. That chip on his shoulder turned into one of the most intimidating careers in NFL history. For Ray Lewis, that meant every Ravens-Steelers game wasn't just about offense versus defense. It was personal. It was Ray versus James. The battles between them were legendary. The Ravens and Steelers were built the same way. Tough defenses, hard-running games, and no fear of violence. Harrison made his name with bone-crushing hits, some of which were so vicious they led to fines and rule changes. Fans still remember the NFL constantly flagging Harrison for illegal hits, while he shrugged it off and said he wasn't changing his style for anyone. That was exactly the type of attitude Ray Lewis loved to test. One thing that fueled the rivalry was pride. Ray had long been seen as the most feared defender in the NFL. As Player of the Year in 2008, people started calling him the new standard of toughness. That comparison lit a fire under Ray. He wasn't ready to pass the crown, especially not to a Steeler. Games between Baltimore and Pittsburgh often turned into street fights in pads, and Harrison was usually right at the center of it. Every hit on a Ravens running back felt like a message to Ray. Every time Ray stuffed a Steelers play, he was sending one right back. It wasn't just football, it was a heavyweight fight stretched over 60 minutes. For Ray Lewis, James Harrison wasn't just another linebacker. He was the rival that kept the debate alive. Who was truly the most feared man in football? And every time they met, that question played out in brutal fashion for the whole world to see. If Hines Ward and James Harrison brought the fight to Ray Lewis on the edges, then Ben Roethlisberger was the man right in the middle of it all. And for Ray, nothing felt sweeter than trying to take down Big Ben. Roethlisberger wasn't just another quarterback. At 6'5" and nearly 250 pounds, he was built like a tight end who could throw the ball. Most linebackers loved sacking quarterbacks because they went down easy, but Ben was different. Ray Lewis used to say tackling him felt like dragging down a moving truck. For Ray, it wasn't just about stopping the pass. It was about proving he could bring down the biggest, toughest quarterback in the league. The clashes were epic. Ben had a reputation for holding onto the ball longer than most quarterbacks, trying to extend plays. That style gave Ray and the Ravens defense extra chances to hit him, and they didn't waste those chances. Ray hunted him like prey, and when he got his shot, the collisions were unforgettable. Fans still remember games where Ray met Ben in the backfield, and the crowd erupted as if Baltimore had just scored a touchdown. But Ben wasn't alone. The Steelers' offense always had dangerous weapons, receivers like Santonio Holmes, Mike Wallace, and later Antonio Brown. For Ray, it meant there was never a break. He had to control the middle of the field while still keeping an eye on the deep threats. Hines Ward might have been the dirtiest rival, but the rest of the Steelers' offense was just as much of a headache. What fueled the fire was the stakes. These weren't regular season matchups that came and went. More than once, a trip to the Super Bowl. Ray Lewis carried Baltimore's pride, and Ben Roethlisberger carried Pittsburgh's. Every time they met under the lights, it felt like a heavyweight championship fight where the loser went home empty-handed. For Ray Lewis, Big Ben and the Steelers' offensive stars weren't just rivals. They were obstacles that stood in the way of his legacy. Unforgettable highlights is why fans still call that rivalry the most violent in NFL history. And while most of Ray's grudges came from on-field wars, one of his earliest came from before he even put on a Ravens jersey. That story starts with Daryl Gardner. Back in the 1996 NFL Draft, Ray Lewis was ready to make his mark. He had dominated at Miami and believed he deserved to be taken higher. But when Baltimore had their first ever pick at number 4, they passed on Ray and selected Daryl Gardner instead. Gardner was a huge defensive tackle out of Colorado State, standing 6'6" and over 300 pounds, the kind of player teams thought could anchor their defensive line for years. Ray never forgot that moment. For a competitor like Lewis, being overlooked was fuel, and Gardner became the face of that chip on his shoulder. Even though Baltimore later took Ray with the 26th pick, that decision left a scar. Every time Gardner's name came up, it was a reminder that Ray had to fight for respect in a league that didn't value him the way he thought it should. When they eventually faced each other in the NFL, the matchup had an edge. Gardner went on to play for Washington and Miami, but injuries held back his career. Ray, on the other hand, became the soul of the Ravens. And every time their paths crossed, Ray saw it as proof that teams had gotten it wrong. He didn't just want to beat Gardner. He wanted to dominate him and make sure everyone remembered the mistake. This grudge wasn't like the hard-hitting rivalries with the Steelers. It was quieter, but in some ways, more personal. For Ray, Gardner symbolized the doubt he carried into the league. Beating him wasn't just about winning a game, it was about proving the world wrong. And the way Ray's career soared, while Gardner's faded, made that rivalry feel like the ultimate revenge. If Daryl Gardner was the grudge born from Ray's draft day, then Richard Sherman represented the new wave of players that tested Ray's pride at the end of his career. Loud and unafraid to call out anyone, traits that mirrored Ray's own person. Ray was already a veteran legend in his final years. But that didn't stop Ray from noticing the young cornerback's style. The two never shared the same conference often, but when Baltimore and Seattle clashed, the energy was impossible to ignore, and Ray Lewis wasn't the type to stay quiet. The respect was there, but so was the tension. Sherman once said he thrived on making receivers fear him, and Ray couldn't stand the idea of a defender talking like he owned the game. In Ray's eyes, dominance was something you showed with your play, not just your mouth. What made Sherman a unique rival is that he represented the future. Ray had built his name on toughness, leadership, and setting a standard for fear. Sherman, meanwhile, brought swagger, boldness, and a whole new era of content. And for fans, those moments where their worlds crossed felt like passing the torch in the most awkward way possible. Ray didn't hate Sherman as a person. He hated what Sherman stood for, the idea that someone else could take over the spotlight that he had owned for so long. Always moves forward. But in those fiery exchanges, you could see the clash of two generations, both unwilling to give an inch. And Ray Lewis just couldn't stomach. And if Richard Sherman was the rival who represented the new school of loud confidence, then Vontaze Burfict was the one who represented something else entirely: chaos. Burfict was one of the most controversial players of his era. He played linebacker for the Cincinnati Bengals, and from the very beginning, his reputation was tied to dirty hits, late shots, and constant fines. If you asked defenders who the nastiest player in the game was, Burfict's name almost always came up. And for Ray Lewis, a man who built his career on toughness but also on respect for the game, Burfict was everything wrong with football. The rivalry between them was strange because Burfict came into the league just as Ray was preparing to leave it. But their paths still crossed, and when they did, sparks flew. Ray didn't hide his feelings about Burfict's style. He felt Burfict crossed the line between hard football and dangerous play. That was something Ray, despite his reputation as a fierce hitter, never accepted. For Ray, toughness was about meeting a man head-on, not about blindsiding him after the whistle. To Ray, it was disrespectful to the sport, and that made it personal. He saw in Burfict a version of football that didn't deserve respect, and he never held back in saying so. The clash between Ray and Burfict wasn't about division rivalries or playoff games. It was about philosophy. Ray Lewis embodied the old-school linebacker. Violent, yes, but always within the unwritten code of respect. Burfict shattered that code. Their tension symbolized the line between being feared for greatness and being hated for recklessness. For Ray Lewis, Burfict wasn't just another opponent. He was a stain on the position Ray had spent his entire career elevating. And in Ray's eyes, that made him one of the players he could never truly respect. A rival not just on the field, but in the very definition of what football should be. At the end of the day, these rivalries weren't just about football. They were about pride, toughness, and the fight for respect. For Ray Lewis, every clash, whether it was with Hines Ward, James Harrison, Ben Roethlisberger, Darrell Gardner, Richard Sherman, or Vontaze Burfict, became part of his story. These weren't just games, they were battles that helped shape his legacy as one of the fiercest players the NFL has ever seen. Ray Lewis's greatness didn't come only from his stats or championships. It came from the enemies he faced, the grudges that fueled him, and the rivalries that defined an entire era of football.